One thing, of course, though, that has changed is that since we've lost a lot of the net metering programs that we've had in the past, or more generous net metering programs, now battery storage is becoming part of the mainstream solar discussion. But what are some of the common misconceptions, do you think, about solar and storage systems? Maybe some of the things that salespeople or homeowners assume at the time of sale, and what are some of the things that can bite you further down the road?
So I think the biggest problem is that salespeople are afraid to have these conversations with homeowners.
All right, welcome back to the Solar Surge podcast. Today we're coming to you from FranklinWH Battery headquarters in San Jose, California. And this afternoon I'm joined by Justin Hopkins, Senior Director of Strategic Accounts at FranklinWH Battery. And Justin, we're going to be talking about how solar and storage got a black eye in 2023, and of course what we can do as an industry to turn it around in 2024. So I thank you for joining us on the podcast today. Really good seeing you, man. Thanks for doing this with us.
Thanks for having me, Joe. Pleasure.
Yeah. So, man, I guess where do we start? 2023, really probably the worst year I can remember in terms of solar business activity since I've been involved in solar. One thing, of course, though, that has changed is that since we've lost a lot of the net metering programs that we've had in the past, or more generous net metering programs, now battery storage is becoming part of the mainstream solar discussion. But I want to hear your take on it. Why do you think solar and storage got a black eye in 2023, and what are some of the things we can do to fix it?
It's a layered question, but I do think it comes down to a couple things. This industry has grown a lot since it kind of took off. I got into this in 2008. So California was still a young market at the time, and really the only place where solar panels were being installed at any scale. Since then, we've seen several 100,000 jobs come out of the solar industry across the country. We have a joke internally that was maybe for 150,000 people that should have stayed out of work. But the reality is that it's a subsidized industry. The federal government's picking up a lot of the cost. That allows for a little more freedom, I think, in navigation, which allows for some of these bad actors to kind of come through. Certainly a little bit of a gold rush. Bill Gates talked about the solar industry as having a very easy learning curve, right? It doesn't take a lot to understand how it works and be able to explain it to somebody. But that's not enough to sell it. That's not enough to consider yourself a consultant. And I think that's where we've seen the lines being blurred now, right?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And in fact, I've actually used that term several times myself, gold rush. I think a lot of sales guys got into the business with a gold rush mentality of there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of money to be made. And a lot of people have made a lot of money in solar. But a lot of that was in an environment where we had lower interest rates, where you could do 1-for-1 bill swaps or 2-for-1 bill swaps in some cases because interest rates were so low. And so the learning curve, as you said, for a new solar sales professional was pretty low. You could sell the concept of solar to a homeowner without having to get into too much detail, without requiring too much formal education. How are things changed in the solar market of 2024?
Well, we're very reliant on technology to give us the truth, right? And sometimes it's a little more layered than that. Especially in 2024, we're seeing the demand for batteries go up, which requires another level of engineering and, again, a commitment to black and white truth, right? I think it's easy to color the lines. I think there's a lot of modeling softwares out there, and you can put the same number into every one of them, and they're all going to give you back a little bit different number. So I think when we can all agree upon certain principles and certain design characteristics, that's what's going to help this industry get a little bit more of its ethics and the ground beneath its feet back. It's not going to feel so shifty.
Right. Yeah, and I think about it like this too, as it's really becoming more of a technical sale, right? Where you're not selling a concept, you're not selling the concept of solar. Now you really need to be selling a properly designed solar and storage system for that particular home in order for this to work properly. Isn't that right? But what's a lot of what you're seeing out there?
You're absolutely right. I think in the past solar panels could generate all the energy you needed because we were in a net metering landscape, meaning whatever power we sent back to the grid, you got a credit for it to use later. It was great, right? Like, hey buddy, let me borrow $1 from you. I'll give you $1 back later, right?
Right.
No
right.
problem. But our friends have, I would like to think that the utilities have kind of become like that friend who's tired of loaning out money. And they're like, you know what? No, that's cool. I'll give you $1, but you got to give me back $1.25 or $1.50 or $4, whatever it is, right? The utilities have become like a hard money lender with your kilowatt hours. And so now it's that much more important to preserve your investment, the return on investment, the ROA that comes with that, right? And batteries up until now have proven to be the best solution for maintaining your power to use it for later. That doesn't mean that all are created equal, and that doesn't mean that everybody selling these knows what they're doing.
Right. And I know a lot of the content that we do, because frankly, I talk to a lot of the viewers and I see a lot of the comments as they come in. A lot of the content that we do on how to evaluate battery systems is being consumed not only by owners or end users, but it's also by sales professionals as well that are trying to wrap their heads around how do these batteries fit into the solar sales equation. So, again, though, talking about sort of how we got a black eye in 2023, what are some of the common misconceptions, do you think, about solar and storage systems? Maybe some of the things that salespeople or homeowners assume at the time of sale, and what are some of the things that can bite you further down the road?
Certainly. I think the biggest misconception people make is that everything's going to be the same all the time, or that it's going to be consistent, right? We use energy in different patterns, different flows, and typically it's weather-based and seasonal, right? Depending on if it's cold, we're using our electric heater. If it's hot, we're using our air conditioning unit. But I think what the biggest black eye has come on the industry so far is that a lot of folks that are designing these for homeowners are designing it to get the homeowner a feeling. Like they want the homeowner to feel fuzzy and warm. They want them to like what they see in front of them on paper. But the reality is that going off grid, building a system that is able to offset all your energy and then also manage that at nighttime and evening and dusk and even early morning when the sun's out but maybe isn't shining bright enough, that is a very layered design. And it is custom fit to every single homeowner differently, and often comes with a really high price tag. So it's scary for salespeople to deliver that to the homeowner. They don't even want to start the conversation, right? They don't want to introduce that concept that this might be a $50,000, $70,000, $80,000 project, not a $20,000 slap some glass on the roof and get out of there. So I think the biggest problem is that salespeople are afraid to have these conversations with homeowners, and homeowners, for better or worse, you're doing your best to get the knowledge, but you're not electrical engineers, and we understand that, right? So it's on us to deliver these designs with some efficacy.
Absolutely. So you touched on one point there. Let's unpack that a little bit. A lot of the sales professionals that came into the industry over the past few years, especially those that were like non-technical background sales professionals, a lot of them are taught to sell on the numbers, right? Mm-hmm. What's the financial savings? What's the financial payback? And of course, you can make that case in a much more compelling way when you have the full one-for-one net metering buyback, mm-hmm. right? So we don't have that one-for-one net metering buyback anymore. Yeah, as we're recording here now, we're in San Jose, California. It's February 2024. So net metering, one-for-one net metering is a thing of the past. Right. So if you want to get that full energy offset, you have to have battery storage. And depending on how much energy you use and when you use it, you may have to have significant amount of battery storage, which could double the cost of your system. Right. And so again, a lot of salespeople, if they're used to selling on, hey, you're going to save solar to, so-called stick it to the power company, or you're going to save all this money immediately by switching to solar. Well, that's not really there anymore, right? Mm-hmm. Right. Now, on a long enough timeline, there still is a financial case to be made that even with the extra cost of batteries, the solar system will pay for itself, especially as the utilities keep raising the rates. So as bad as that is, I mean, you just told me, I think PG&E just raised their rates again. Was it 20%?
24%. I mean, I think about this one. I've been into this, 15 years now, right? When you look at the industry as a whole, I think that what a lot of guys see, right, is they see the time of use conversation. They see 5 and 9 p.m., right? And they think, well, let me get a battery for the customer for that period because that's when it's the most expensive. But here's the thing. Your solar system's only going to produce at the low end 4.5 hours, at the top end 7 to 8 hours a day at best, and that's in the summertime, right? Maybe 5 of those are really good sun hours. The other 18 hours of the day, you need power and you need a source to pull it from. If a solar system is going full send during that time, that's a lot of power lost to the grid where you're not getting the value of, right? You paid for that system and now you're not getting it. So with batteries, I think the biggest misconception in the black eye that I'm concerned about is that, especially in California, reps are designing these systems for a little interval. But the reality is energy is expensive all day. It's expensive after 9 p.m. It's expensive at 5 a.m. in the morning, right? And if you're not getting a credit for the power you made during the day, you're being charged by the utility. If that energy is 40 cents a day, one battery essentially equates to about $25,000 to $26,000 over the warranty period, assuming energy rates stay the same at that number. So I think being afraid to bring it up in conversation is actually a big detriment to the ROI. It makes the solar system much more expensive to the consumer who's buying it.
Sure. And I think that's really should be part of any professional solar sales process. What we call kill the bill in our sales training is you really have to show the homeowner what are the long-term implications of them just doing nothing, right? Because even with the cost of batteries, it's still way cheaper to do solar with your own batteries than it is to just stick with the power company. Huh. And typically the models that we use, with our software, we're modeling like a 4% year-over-year increase. But for the past 3 years, we're seeing like 20% year-over-year increase here in California. And so, of course, again, as bad as that is, it just means that your payback on a solar and storage investment is there. You just need to learn how to articulate it on a long enough timeline so that the homeowner sees they are going to get their investment back. But what they're also, though, getting is some amount of peace of mind and energy independence. Yeah. And I think that's the other thing is that there are several reasons why homeowners buy solar besides just, I'm going to have immediate monthly savings on my bill. What are some of the other reasons why people invest in solar or in solar with battery backup?
Yeah, I mean, the number one reason that I hear from homeowners that they want batteries and backup is for autonomy, for independence. Most people are working from home nowadays, and at least for part of the week. And so the ability to live uninterrupted, to have reduced compromise in their daily life because the utility chooses when and how they can have energy and how much it costs. Being able to take that back, it's very similar to putting a spoiler on your car so that you can buy gas for $2 a gallon, right? And I say $2 a gallon in California because that would be remarkably cheap here. But everywhere else, that's what you guys
I think
are
you've just
used to.
dated yourself.
I just dated myself a little bit, yeah. But the reality is, right, is that there is a better way. You can produce your own energy, just like you pay a mortgage and don't rent your house. It's similar with electricity, right? There's a hole in your house and the power is going out of it, right? The money's running out that door. So the advantage of solar and batteries is that it really seals that door for good. It makes it your power. Inevitably, utilities have had access to our property. They have federal easements. They have access to your livelihood, your ability to keep the food you work hard to make fresh, to keep your medical devices going, right? And they're not necessarily always had the best relationship. So I kind of liken it to changing the locks on an X. That's what batteries essentially do. If you put the right type of system in, that's changing the locks on your utility so that they're the last point of entry.
That's exactly right. And I think philosophically, and this is really why I got into solar, it wasn't because of savings or anything like that. It was because I wanted to be in as strong a position as possible in terms of my energy security at a household level, right? Mm-hmm. I can't necessarily save the world's problems, but at a household level, the technology is there. You can be energy independent, and you can basically put yourself in a position where the power company's there, but they're like the last resort. Right?
Yeah.
You use the solar to charge your batteries, run off your batteries at night, and then if the batteries can't keep up for whatever reason, you need a little bit more, okay, you pull a little bit more from the power company.
Right.
But that's kind of like the last resort option. And frankly, I think it's something where that's something, kind of tapping into some of that core American spirit of kind of that just being free and independent. Well, this is something you can do with your power situation. Too many people, unfortunately, have been kind of conditioned into this position of, just pay whatever the power company tells you, just do whatever they say, or they're going to shut the lights off. Right. And if you think about it like that, it's like, who would want to accept that kind of a dynamic? If you had an alternate option where you could be your own utility and only use the monopoly as, if they're the only option that's left. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
No, I couldn't agree more. I think that we're headed to an era, right? Well, especially with $1.5 trillion being invested into energy infrastructure over the next decade, right? Due to the IRA bill, we're heading to an era where customers can take that control back. Whether it's electric cars, whether it's heat pumps, We're moving into an era where clean energy is readily available and accessible. And right now, the people taking advantage of it are the utilities, right? And then they're just selling it back down to you in the form of a higher bill to the consumer. It's always been there to take control of, but maybe the technology wasn't quite there yet. And I think that's what drew me to Franklin as a whole, why I'm here, because this day and age, it's affordable. It can become part of the infrastructure of your home. And that house, as it gets passed down to new homeowners or generations of families for years to come, will be at the leading edge of that independence, rather than waiting for the utility to tell you what your next bill is going to cost. Not to mention our livelihoods, right? These freezes have become deadlier and deadlier every year. These heat waves are doing the same thing. And so having the ability to go to sleep at night knowing your family's protected, it's hard to put a price tag on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's probably one of the things we should talk about is, how do you, if somebody's out there, maybe they're considering, do I get a battery for my home or do I just buy a traditional generator? What are some of the pros and cons of each? But, getting back to kind of the main topic, which is, how did we get such a black eye? As these systems do get more complex and you have to design the battery storage specific for the home and how the home's intended energy use pattern is going to play out. I think another thing that I've seen with some of the reps that I've talked to and some of the homeowners I've talked to is that a number of the solar reps are still overselling what a battery can do, or maybe they're overselling what a smaller battery can do. Whereas to achieve their goals, a homeowner's goals, you may have to install multiple batteries or larger batteries. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it goes back to that price thing, right? Like, I think that most salespeople know what a battery can do. They're just afraid of stacking it all the way up to give the customer the right experience because of what it might cost. There's a big understanding, at least across the board. I think that most solar professionals shy away from batteries. They're going to tell you that, technology will get better. It's going to get cheaper. That's typically a sign that somebody doesn't really understand how these work in the first place.
Well, I know back in the day, a lot of the sales professionals were taught exactly that. Is like, if the homeowner asks about batteries, tell them batteries are it's too new, just wait. They're going to be cheaper 2 years from now. And they've repeated that line for the last 8 years. Now there really is no truth to that.
Yeah, it's our own fault. It's our own fault. We did it to ourselves. But here we sit, right? And I think that most salespeople want the best. They believe that they're giving you the best, right? And I think there's a few bad actors out there, but the majority of people have the best intentions. But when we look at that big, the pie graph, right, and helping, I think that consumers need to be as educated as the people that are coming in their homes, just like they are about cars, just like they are about roofs, everything else. A lot of salespeople are going to tell you what they want, right? It's up to you to tell them what you want. But doing the math is relatively simple on storage. They're stackable batteries. I just think people don't build them big enough because of the fear of asking for the business.
That's a good point, right? You have to, as a sales professional, you're going to have to get past this idea of, I want the cheapest price quote. And that's why I've been preaching this for many, many years now. Is if you are a consumer shopping for solar, or especially if you're shopping for solar with storage, with a generator hookup, maybe some other options, you do not want to be shopping for this based on who's the cheapest guy in town or who's the cheapest bid in town. Really, this is more like who do I have the most confidence in that they have designed the exact right system for me, and I've got confidence that they're going to be able to execute a technically more complex installation and keep it healthy for the next 25 years.
Batteries are funny because solar, you need it every day. It's just going to fire up, right? But batteries, you only really, when you need them for backup is rare, right? You use the batteries to keep the power from going back to the grid, back to the utility and losing money. But the reality is what these batteries can do, we're talking about zombie apocalypse, right? If the world's ending, what can my battery function? And whether it's a deep freeze, whether it's a hailstorm, whether it's rain or heat, when those weather events happen and you need these to work, that's the thing I think that's where this investment in doing it the right way really comes into play.
Yeah, and right? that's the scenario that really I think homeowners need to have in their mind when they're evaluating these.
What kind of situation will I be in?
Exactly.
When
what
I
kind
need
of
this?
situation will I be in when I need it? And did I trust that my contractor did it right the first time? Because he may not be available by phone, when I need this thing.
If your system's down and it's a freeze, and you're not able to keep your home warm and those frozen pipes, I mean, you're talking what, $15,000, $20,000 expense. So there's more protection than just bill savings, for sure.
Yeah. So again, kind of getting back to your point, right? Obviously, I think a professional salesperson should be able to preemptively let the homeowner know up front, look, this is not going to be cheap. Whatever I'm showing you here is not going to be cheap. My job is to make sure I've got the exact correct system design for you that's going to meet your needs in the various use cases, whether it's self-consumption, whether it's whole house emergency backup, or both. We have to make sure that the system is designed properly. That may mean we put in more capacity at a higher cost, but this is what it's going to take to do what you want it to do. And I think that's one of the things I've seen a lot is, and again, I don't know if it's miseducation or just being afraid to present a higher price, but I've seen homeowners under the impression that, a single battery is going to back up my whole house. And obviously there's different size batteries available. Yours is one of the largest, if not the largest home battery in terms of a single unit. But there's different size batteries available. Some of them are not designed to run the whole house. Some of them are designed to run maybe 4 circuits, right?
Yeah.
Keep the fridge and the lights on. For whole house backup, a lot of times we're talking about 2, 3 batteries.
Right. Or more, right? We could stack up to 15. We haven't seen it yet, but I'm waiting for that day. But the reality is there are certain manufacturers that made a product that's great for bill saving, time of use applications, right? There's certain manufacturers that built batteries for whole home backup. There's batteries that are built for off-grid, right? Every different battery has its application. So I would get nervous if a person's shoving a certain brand down my throat. I think you want to look at what's the good, what's the better, what's the best option for me and my family, right? And let me look at these different scenarios, because there's always going to be nuances to each of the designs. And it's not so much about the features as it is about the benefit that comes at the end of it. And that's what you need to be focused on, which is, what am I getting out, what I want out of this? Because by investing in something and undersizing it, I'm going to be left wanting more, which essentially nullifies my purchase in the first place.
Exactly.
Right? Might as well have never got it.
Yep.
So I think as an industry, what we can do to protect consumers from this is giving them the cold hard facts, being super honest, designing these, and helping people understand that the sun's only out for a little bit. So our battery systems really should encapsulate what our usage looks like for the entire day.
Exactly. And that's part of why we put together the Solar Surge University program is to get a lot of that technical discussion into a sales training program, so that the sales professionals out there that are representing these systems understand that, look, there are different reasons why people buy solar. You have to ask up front what their goal is with looking at a solar and storage system, because depending on what their goals and the requirements are is going to influence how you design it, how you pitch it. So the idea that a solar professional should ever shove a solution down a homeowner's throat, to me, doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Right? To me, our job as solar professionals is ask the right questions so you understand what they're trying to achieve, and then put together the right equipment package to match it. It should be as simple as that. I mean, I know that's my approach to sales has been, okay, you need a system to do this. I've got the expertise. I'm going to put it together. This is a solution that will meet your needs. Here's the price. If you like it, here's the next step. If not, no hard feelings. But I warned you why you don't want to hire the cheapest guy in town for this.
Right. And consumers should know there's a variance, right? So a lot of these guys are buying over the phone or you're selling over like web sales, like Solar Surge. And then when you get to the home, you find out, well, where the consumer wants the batteries is 100 feet from the main panel, right? And that's going to make this job more expensive. So, making sure your salesperson's asking the right questions, and, understanding where these things are going to go, that kind of thing is going to make the consumer experience much, much better long term.
Absolutely. Now, we talked a lot about kind of on the consumer sales rep side of things, but also, Justin, one of the things we spoke about earlier off camera was some of the challenges that the installers, the contractors are having in terms of getting their operation up to speed with how to successfully install batteries. What are some thoughts, or do you have any thoughts as far as in terms of how do we get a black eye in 2023 on the install side? What are some things that you've seen that you didn't like, and how do you think we can improve?
Yeah. Well, personally, looking at the California market specifically, I'm very nervous with the sizing that I've seen from batteries. I see a lot of 10 kilowatt solar systems with 10 kilowatt hours of battery attached to it. When some of these 10 kilowatt systems are going to generate 50 to 75 kilowatt hours a day, that 10 kilowatt hour battery isn't going to come in very helpful for the customer in terms of saving money. So, I mean, speaking to the installer base, we need to be better about the way that we design these things and attaching enough capacity with the solar to own it and manage it. Otherwise, we have to force customers to use all of their power in a small little window. I think an understanding too of preparing for electrification, building systems the right way to allow for these customers to get electric cars and expand without it costing them an arm and a leg when that day comes.
Okay. And I know that there are some advanced methods for modeling, exactly how and when a battery is used based on the home's like hour by hour usage breakdown. But since we don't probably have time to do that during this discussion, are there some general rules of thumb for, let's say, a California installer? Maybe they've been installing solar for a few years, but they're new to installing solar with battery storage. Is there any general rules of thumb as far as size ratios, kilowatt hours of solar to kilowatt hour storage on the battery?
I mean, general rule of thumb, for those of us that have been doing this a while, is you're always looking at about a minimum of 2/3 of the daily usage for the battery and 1/3 for solar. That's kind of your minimum blanket, right? So if I use 40 kilowatt hours in a day, at a minimum, right, I want to have 27 to 28 kilowatt hours of backup to support that. It's a good rule of thumb given that weather changes, and that gives the customers freedom to use power in the evening or during the day at a minimum, right?
Sure.
That's really where the line should be drawn, especially in a non-export or a non-net metering situation.
Makes sense. So you said about 60% or about 2/3 of the home's consumption,
daily usage
have that much in storage capacity.
Correct.
For the battery. Now, what about power to capacity ratio on the batteries? I know this is a topic that we also touched on a little bit earlier, because when you talk about a battery, oftentimes you're talking about how much instant power can you get out of it? Like, what's the max power? If we're talking about a car, like what's the max horsepower, right?
Right.
But that's really not the whole picture, right? There's also how much capacity do you have stored in there. So if you're running at full power, let's say, how long can you run?
Right. It's like listing your miles per gallon right next to your 0 to 60 stat, right? Like, look how fast I can, because you're not getting 30 miles per gallon driving 4.5 seconds to 0 to 60.
Exactly, right.
Right. So when we think of capacity, which is how much storage do I have, versus output, which is how much power am I getting out of the battery? What can it run in my house? The higher the capacity, the closer the the higher the output and the closer the ratio to capacity of output to battery means essentially the faster it's going to go. The faster you can use it and the faster you can deplete it. Our battery was designed with a very specific number in mind to give customers a minimum of 2.5 hours of power when the battery is maxed out at its output ratio. But with a lot of the products that we're seeing nowadays, these can be drained in a matter of an hour, especially if you're using more than what's on there, which in a lot of cases is less time than when you realize you're in an outage with backup power. Because you haven't looked at your phone, maybe you're watching TV, and all of a sudden you find out your battery's drained. So it's really important to know, do I have an energy management solution? Can I see, can I track what my energy is using in real time on my house so I can make educated decisions? And it's important to have enough capacity, plenty of kilowatt hours to support that high output that's coming from my battery system. Otherwise, batteries can drain almost instantly.
Yeah, exactly. And just to use like some round numbers here, right? So let's say you have a 10 kilowatt hour battery. That's the storage capacity, and it has a max power of 10 kilowatts, right? So that 10 kilowatt hours basically means 10 kilowatts of output for a duration of 1 hour equals 10 kilowatt hours of consumption. In other words, in this fictional example, that battery would be drained in 1 hour if you're running it at full blast. Mm-hmm. So if let's say as a sales professional say, well, hey, this battery can run your air conditioner. Well, if the battery is running at full capacity to run that air conditioner, it means you get 1 hour of air conditioning and then the battery's drained and you're waiting to the next day for the sun to come back up. So again, I think having that proper power to capacity ratio. I know for my clients, I generally recommend at least 30 kilowatt hours of storage for a whole house backup. So that way you can have even some limited use of air conditioning overnight before the sun comes up the next day and can take over. Yeah. So you got to definitely got to look at both.
Yeah, we had a period when our product first came out, right? We let everybody know that we could start a 4-ton AC, a 4-ton air conditioning unit, which was actually theoretically true. The problem is we can only do that, right? With one battery, you can absolutely run a 4-ton, but that's all you can run. And then also, you can't turn on your lights or open your garage door or anything for that matter, right? And then it's also pending on how old is the air conditioning unit, right? Like, is this a brand new, super efficient AC? Is this a 10-year-old one that you bought at Costco that's the end of its Sears, right? It requires more energy to start up. That's something you have to consider. And it's very unlikely that the solar person or storage person knows what that's going to look like. So ideally, right, at the end of the day, we have to kind of be self-aware and understand what your appliances use and run as well.
Yeah. And also, I would say being honest with ourselves about what is it that we really need to run during an emergency and what is more of a nice to have. And that's where the whole load control is coming into this conversation, where it's, but back when I started in solar, right, and I was doing batteries before most people on the East Coast. Back then, pretty much all the systems we were doing were critical loads only on the battery backup. In other words, we weren't trying to run the whole house. In some cases, larger systems, we would try to run one of the air conditioning units. But there are certain loads that we just considered non-essential that we wouldn't bother with. Things like electric stoves and electric clothes dryers.
Right.
We figure, why bother having to run that much? Each of those could pull up to 4,000 or 5,000 watts, just those two appliances each. So we figured, why try to carry heavy loads like that when we're running in an emergency backup mode, where we would rather conserve that energy for running things like the refrigerator and the water pump instead. So I know one of the things that you have incorporated in your product is a smart circuit or an intelligent load control. How does that help get more running time out of the batteries?
Right. And you nailed it. Like, do we need our pool pump cleaning our pool while Hurricane Ian is going outside? Right. Probably not. Yeah, probably right. Not, yeah. So the idea behind the smart circuits was exactly that, which is, we like the term reduced compromise. And the reason we use that is because for a long time up until now, you could back up your fridge, your lights, your internet, your TVs, and that was what you choose to back up, right? But really, most of the loads in your house are low amperage, whether it's the lights, alarm systems, garage door opener. They're not crazy electrical pulls. It's your air conditioning unit. It's your heat pump. It's your stove, your electric stove, your pool. Those are the things that use a lot of energy. So what we've done is we've relocated those to a smart circuit in our gateway, which with the thought being, well, if I want to turn this off in an outage, or if I want to program it to automatically shut off, say I'm sleeping and I want to make sure I turn my pool pump off in the middle of the night so I can have air conditioning to be comfortable, right? Or vice versa, right? My pool guy's coming tomorrow and I don't want to be embarrassed at the side of my pool. We're going to sweat it out. So the pool looks, whatever the customer's needs are, we want them to be able to make that choice. I've got a lady in Hawaii. She lives off grid, and some jerk sold her a electric hot water heater in Hawaii. But she sits and she turns off the water on her teenage boys, right? Like, boy, get out of the tub. Turns off the hot water so he gets to school on time. So there's a lot of applications.
Yeah. So, and I think that's part of it too. And I think having those things where they can all speak together, the solar, the battery, the load control, everything intelligently controlled on one platform, so you're not sitting there trying to flip circuit breakers manually trying to control it. Because that's how it used to be back in the days. Say, which one is a water heater? Okay, I turn that off and then I can fire up the generator. It's a better solution here for that now.
Right. We just want people to be comfortable if you can be, right? And then, the nice thing is your solar system's going to start your charge your batteries up the next day as long as the sun's shining. So advantage you have is when the power goes out, I want to make sure that I've got enough power to get me through that part, but it's going to turn off everything automatically, program it. You can go the next day and the next day and the next day without it. Because right now we deal with at max a 3 or 4 day power outage. I have no doubt that there's going to be days that come where we're going to be looking at weeks to get power restored.
Yeah, well, especially you talk about other markets outside of CONUS, like Hawaii, Puerto Rico. I mean, a number of these places, it's common to have week-long, multi-week power outages. Yeah. So one other thing before we wrap up on today's podcast, but we talk about how we got a black eye. Now, I know another issue that a lot of times we don't like to talk about in terms of home batteries is the potential of having battery fires or having thermal damage because the batteries overheat. What are some of the pitfalls or what are some of the mistakes that solar companies have made in the past that have led to those kind of incidents, and how do we prevent that in the future?
Installers, train your people. And I say it clearly, train your people. it is so important. We are dealing not only with volatile chemicals, but you're also power electronics. It is easy to install these the wrong way, and it also create a bad name for the manufacturer, right? A lot of times it's not necessarily the manufacturer's fault. It was installed the wrong way by the installer in general. So I think we being super honest with each other we consider ourselves a partner to our installers. We watch them very closely, and we track what they do and how they perform and their customer experience very closely, because we need to know that at the end of the day, the consumer is getting what they paid for, right? It's kind of like a California lemon law with cars. At the end of the day, you want to make sure it's done right the whole way through, because it's not a small investment or a small purchase. I think right now, installers can take more time. I think they should be less concerned with saving the consumer a couple $1,000s or $1,000 here or there and doing these the right way, so that this industry has the right opportunity to take off. Because I think we can stop all of this as fast as we started it by not doing it the right way.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you 100%. And I would say, through the entire chain of the transaction, whether it's the system owner or the consumer, look at your contractor as a partner.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily want to nickel and dime them because you think they're going to, get overwhelmed. In reality, the contractor is taking on a lot of risk to make sure that the overall solution works. But of course, there's also that partnership between the contractor and the manufacturer, right? Because the manufacturer can put product on the shelf, but it's the contractor that's going to actually install it and turn it into a functioning system at the home. And that's one thing that I think makes our industry unique, other than other parts of technology, where let's say you might go to a car dealership and just buy a car off the lot, or you go to Best Buy, you buy a laptop or a cell phone off the shelf. The retailer in that case doesn't really have a whole lot of risk. Once they've made the sale, and now it's between you and the manufacturer. But when you talk about a solar and storage install, that partnership between the homeowner, the contractor, and the manufacturer, that is an ongoing relationship. And so, absolutely, contractors take the time to learn how to do it right and do it right. Homeowners take the time to really look for the best contractor and manufacturer partners to make sure that you're getting the right equipment, but you're also getting it installed by the most competent installer, not the guy that's going to give you the cheapest price on day one and maybe out of business 2 years from now.
150,000 jobs for 75,000 people should stay out of work. That's our industry. I mean, I hate to say it. There's some great ones and there's some bad ones. Most are great though. And I think a lot of people got into solar to do something good. It's a new industry. And for those of us, a lot of us come from different industries, whether it was finance or music or whatever. People did solar because it felt good on the soul. And I joke that batteries really put the soul back into solar. Like, this is why we got into this business in the first place, right? Is that energy independence, that excitement of being free. As a company, Franklin, that is our biggest message, is you do not have to be a slave to the utility anymore. Yes, there is a entry cost to that to get through it and to get to the other side, but it's been shown historically that there's a fantastic ROI, right? 15%, 20% sometimes. That those are our ROI numbers you don't hear from your family planner. So it's still a great opportunity for homeowners to make the switch, to gain that freedom. We just have to do it the right way. And I think as an industry, we're all kind of working to come together to make sure that consumers have the best experience possible.
Great. And of course, that's a big reason why we're here doing the podcast here, talking about these issues. I know as an industry, we're working at keeping up with making sure that we can overcome these challenges. And I can tell you, for me as a guy who's been doing batteries for now over 12 years, it really is exciting to see this technology now coming into the mainstream. Yes, we still are in sort of that early adopter phase and we're working out the kinks, but I think technology really is coming into its maturity now. So it's very satisfying to see that, because you're right, it's getting back to that original spirit, I know for me, which was, how can I be energy independent? At an individual level, even not yet at a national level, but how can we be energy independent? Hey, technology's there now. Yeah. We just got to do it right.
Exactly. I think we just need to start putting booties in our shoes when we walk into homeowners' houses. Start there. Be like the rest of the service industry. And
sure.
Yeah, one step at a time.
Brush your teeth.
Yeah, brush your teeth.
Anyway, folks. Well, we thank you all for tuning in and spending some more time with Solar Surge. Again, this has been a chat with Justin Hopkins, Senior Director of Strategic Accounts at FranklinWH Battery. Folks, as always, if you're getting good value from the videos that you watch here on Solar Surge and on the podcast, make sure you hit that thumbs up button. But that pretty much wraps it up for today's episode. As always, I'm Joe Ordia here, encouraging you to get prepared and be empowered. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.